How's it going, everybody? Let me get to the comments section and I'll look for a 5x5 or a thumbs up on YouTube and another 5x5 or a thumbs up on Twitch. That way I know our sound's good to go. And then once we got the sound, I will get this party started for you guys. Let's see. All right, 5x5 on Twitch. Thanks, Betty. And 5x5 on YouTube. So we're golden. Welcome to the AlphaWarrior show, you guys. I'm Alfredo Luna, known as Alpha. I'm going to buy a little time for our guests, which works out fine. just to kind of give you guys an update on what's going on tonight. So, originally, we were going to have three guests tonight: Meghan Walsh, Mike Pack, and Penny Shepard. Um, Me and Penny are going to do our own show, hopefully here in the next week or two. And tonight it will be me, Megan, and Mike. A little bit of a last minute decision, but everything happens for a reason. And like I said, it's still going to be a phenomenal show. And the next one with Penny will be a phenomenal show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a little bit of a video. But before we get into that, let me get this lined up so it's ready when I do go. Is tonight's show is Meghan Walsh. For those that you don't know, she's the daughter of the host of America's Most Wanted, John Walsh. And she has an extremely important and tragic story of what's happened to her recently. And like I said, I'm going to let her explain that. So I'm going to get this video ready. And by the time this video is ready, our second guest should be here and we'll get started. So let me pull it up for you guys. It's only about 7 minutes, and then I got another little short one right after that. Got a good sized crowd coming in tonight. I like that. All right. And actually, one more thing before we get started. Let me give you guys an update on my mom. A couple of you guys messaged me on Twitter, so I want to let you guys kind of know what's going on with her. She's moved out of the rehab facility that she was at, and they're going to try about 3 to 4 weeks of outpatient care. She's with her two sisters, my two aunts, who are both retired. So as long as there's no safety concerns, she'll be doing her outpatient therapy, her physical therapy, and her speech therapy there. So please continue with your guys' prayers. She's in beautiful San Diego. And it's a lot better than being inside the four doors of a hospital room. So for those of you that have been inquiring, that's kind of what's going on with my mom. The other thing to give you guys an update now, because I know I will notoriously forget again at the end of the show, is on December 9th is my next court hearing for the gun violence protective order and also the criminal case that the FBI has against me. So please keep me in your guys' prayers over that. I was going to do this at the end of the show, but since we need some time right now, I'll take that time to address it right now. It has been a grueling 10, 11 months since all this kind of went down with the FBI. And as you guys know, it's already been a 2.5 year battle with my department. And I know some of you guys kind of been wondering about my absence on Twitter over the last few days. And I just needed to take some much needed, family time, with the missus and the kids. Because I'm exhausted, you guys. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. But it is your guys's messages, whether it's on the Gifts and Go campaign, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's the emails to the show. Some of you guys write some short little letters. Some of you guys write some really lengthy ones. And when I read those things, it really reminds me of why I got to push through this, why I got to, get my knee up off the canvas, grab the ropes and continue the fight. And believe it or not, when I go into spaces and I see some of you who just a few months ago and a few weeks ago were fairly new, wouldn't speak, just listeners, and I see you guys grabbing mics, I see you guys starting your own spaces, you don't understand how much that does for me. And I know I'm not just speaking for myself. I know that, Gunny Michelle and James and all these other people that, put on spaces and shows, I know it has to mean the same for them. So regardless of what you may think, your presence, your support, and your words have given me what I need, at the very least, to continue on in this fight, to remind me of what my oath was for. So I appreciate that 100%. And for the Marines watching tonight, I really hope you guys love this beautiful piece of material that's going to be wrapping my body tonight. So with that, let's get this video started. I know you guys heard enough of me talking, and I'll jump into comments when we watch. Like I said, it's only about 7.5, 8 minutes.
It's one of the most famous crimes in American history. In fact, it's been called the crime that changed America. Before the disappearance of 6-year-old Adam Walsh, there were no Amber Alerts or missing kids on milk cartons. But during the decades the case went unsolved, Adam's father, John Walsh, got famous for hunting down bad guys on America's Most Wanted. Adam's mother has been largely silent until tonight.
This is America's Most Wanted.
On his show, America's Most Wanted, John Walsh has helped capture more than 1,000 criminals.
Next time I see Alan White's face, I want to see bars in front of it.
But unbelievably, for decades, the one case he couldn't crack was the murder of his own son. Until several years ago, when his wife, Reve, said she had had enough.
I can't go to my grave not doing everything that I could possibly do. And I said, we're going to get a cold case detective, and we're going to start from the beginning. I don't care if you go to work just to pay the bill of this private investigator, but we're going to get somebody.
It has been 30 years since Adam Walsh was abducted in America's most famous case of a missing child. During that time, Reve has largely stood by silently while her husband held the spotlight. But in this rare interview, she tells her story, the story of one mother's quiet, fierce determination.
Do you remember the last thing that he said to you?
Sure. I said, I'm going right over here to the lamp department. And he said, okay, Mommy, I know where that is.
With no thought in your mind that that was the last conversation?
No.
Adam was abducted from outside a suburban shopping mall on July 27, 1981. 2 agonizing weeks later, John got the news that Adam's severed head had been found floating in a canal.
I got that call. And they said, we got to find your wife, and we got to tell her. And I said, you know what? I'll tell her. I'll be the one to tell her. Toughest thing I've ever done.
When all this was going on, and I just thought to myself, God, I can't wait, till it's 20 years or 25 years from now. I don't care about getting old. I just want this experience of my life to be that far away from me, because I thought it would be, different, but it's really not.
I don't know who would do this to a 6-year-old child. I can't conceive of it.
The horror of losing a child was made worse, say the Walshes, by their bitter disappointment with the local police in Hollywood, Florida, who they believe botched the murder investigation.
Little did we know that nothing was being done.
One nightmare after another.
There was even a prime suspect, this man, Ottis Toole, an admitted serial killer who was already in prison.
You done killed one and you kept killing and killing. It gets easier and easier, and it don't really bother you.
Toole made 24 documented confessions to killing Adam Walsh, including during this 1984 interview with the Texas Rangers.
Have you ever wished you hadn't killed someone?
Well, I kind of feel bad about that Adam Walsh kid.
That's the only person you've ever killed that you feel bad about?
That's the youngest child I ever killed. He's only 6 years old.
But even this confession was not enough for the Hollywood Police Department to push to file charges. And so after the case sat idle for roughly 1/4 of a century, Reve urged John to hire a cold case investigator. This man, Joe Matthews, a retired police detective.
So you look at the markers.
Matthews went back and painstakingly pored over every one of the 10,000 pages in the case file, reporting back almost daily to Reve. Matthews concluded that the lead detective on the Walsh case, a man named Jack Hoffman, had become convinced, despite compelling evidence, that Ottis Toole didn't do it.
So Ottis Toole confesses to this crime repeatedly, knows things about the crime that only the police knew, yet the lead investigator, Detective Hoffman, doesn't believe him. Why not?
ego was involved in tunnel vision. And the tunnel vision is you come up with your own hypotheses as to what took place. And you work that case to validate your own hypotheses.
After combing through the case file, Matthews made a major discovery, a roll of film from the crime scene of Ottis Toole's car, film that the original detectives never even bothered to have developed. The film contained what Matthews considered to be a monumental revelation.
How long did it take for you to realize what you had here?
Within seconds, when I was going through the photos.
On the rear floorboard of the car, where Toole had admitted to tossing Adam's severed head, the outline of a face with the darkened eye sockets and open mouth.
You actually see his image, and it's as clear as the, Shroud of Turin.
To me, it was the one thing that a mother knows is that this is their child. This picture is their child.
In 2008, based on these new pictures and a mountain of other evidence that Detective Matthews finally pulled together in a way that the original detectives had failed to do, the new Hollywood Police Department chief officially closed the case, definitively naming Ottis Toole, who by this time had died in prison, as the man who killed Adam Walsh.
If Ottis Toole was alive today, he would be arrested for the abduction and murder of Adam Walsh on July 27th, 1981.
Listening to the words that came off of Chief Wagner's lips just penetrate my soul.
It took Detective Matthews, working with the Walshes, just 2.5 years to do what the Hollywood Police Department could not do over the course of decades. Today, John and Reve are still living in Florida, where they have a horse farm and 3 children, all born after Adam, who would now be 36 years old.
Come on, baby doll. Yes, yes. Nothing's going to bring Adam back. Nothing's going to bring him back. So the most we could hope for was to have peace, knowing that we know what happened, we know the end result, and the puzzle is finished.
For Nightline, this is Dan Harris.
All right, let me get this audio out of my ear real quick. And get the next one lined up. Someone pull that up. All right, we got both our guests here, you guys, so I'm very happy about that. So, tonight's story, wow, is what I'm going to say right now just to get it started. You guys know me. There's a lot going on. All of us are in this fight for the country. When I started this show, I told you one of the main objectives was to be a voice for the January 6th political prisoners. The other part of that is saving our country. And the most important part was saving the children. And in order for us to save the children, we gotta know where it all starts. We gotta understand the roots of what's going on. We gotta understand who's the one taking them. You guys have seen the stats out there. It's everywhere from 750,000 to over 800,000 kids that go missing every single year just here in the United States. The story you're going to hear tonight is just one family that's just been struck with tragedy for a very long time. And what you're also going to learn is that the story that was told to us wasn't exactly what was going on. And when a very good person started to inquire as to that, things took a really, really rough turn in her life. And you guys are going to hear that tonight. So looks like we lost my second guess. Let me shoot him a text just to make sure he can come back. And while he does that, I'll bring on our next guest. And how's it going, Megan?
Hey, how's it going?
I'll tell you what, to start off, I can hear you and you can hear me. So that is fantastic. So the last few shows, it seems my audio has been on point. And it looks like I got that ironed out. But even to this day, every time I do a show, I'm just like, please, please, please let my audio work. Mike was in here a little bit ago and it looks like he bounced out. So He says he's got to get his audio working. So he'll jump in and we'll ad lib this. The story is profound enough that even if it ultimately ended up just being me and you, it'll work. So if you can, for the guests that don't know who you are, because like I said, I kind of prefaced the show and told them about America's Most Wanted here and the host, who's your father, John Walsh. But a lot of people might not know about his children, outside of Adam. So if you can, just tell the viewers that are watching us tonight a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. My name is Meghan Walsh. I was born not even a year after my brother Adam disappeared from the Sears in Hollywood, Florida. I was born in Hollywood, Florida as well. And then I do have two younger brothers. Some may know my brother Callahan Walsh. Just recently became a co-host with my father on his newer show, In Pursuit with John Walsh. And I also have a 27-year-old brother, Hayden, who came thereafter. So we're the children of John and Reve that have come after Adam, and it's been quite a ride.
I can imagine. Now, the three of us had a chance to talk on the phone last night and kind of get a feel for each other, and the energy in that room was something, or on that phone call. And I kind of told you and Mike when we were talking, I remember, and I'm 42 years old, but I think a lot of people in the audience, if the analytics of YouTube's telling the truth, about 60% of the audience that we have tonight is between the ages of 36 and 52. So everybody's going to be, most of those people at least are going to be very familiar probably with who your father was. I grew up and it was Wednesday nights, the way I remember it. I grew up watching America's Most Wanted, and then it was followed up by Unsolved Mysteries. And when I saw your dad and the story, I was very young when what happened to your brother happened, but that's a story that just kind of stayed in the media year after year after year with Adam. And everybody associates what your dad was and what your dad was a part of as this hero, this good man. But unfortunately, there's another side that we haven't seen of the true story that involves your father, unfortunately. So life for you, you were in the scene, you kind of mingled with all these people, you met all these people. And then a few years ago, there was something that kind of, we said red pilled or woke you up. If you can kind of touch and give us a little bit of background on what that was, was it a specific thing with Epstein? What was it that kind of opened your eyes and kind of started this ball rolling into a nightmare for you?
Mm-hmm. Again, I have been through a lot in my life, and I actually ended up going into healing work and emotional healing and different things of that nature. I was a religious scholar for over 20 years, and being in that environment. Can you hear me? I think we froze.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay.
You're coming in good, and the video's coming in good.
Oh, okay. Mine's frozen. Sorry, guys. Just a second. Okay, as long as we're good. Mine's frozen, but we'll figure it out. So basically I had been in that realm, after leaving fashion and music. So if people look into my background, I was in fashion and music for a long time. And I saw a lot after, especially growing up in the industry, being born in the industry. And I started questioning things, especially when Epstein came out, as you mentioned. That's really when I started questioning my father. Prior to that, I'd started looking into my brother's case. The case files are public record. And I thought finally at 30 something years old, I would not, kind of look into the story myself and not just the narrative that, the public has been given and that I've been given my entire life and never really questioned, rightfully so. All of this, to be going through this now that we'll get into is horrifying for me. It's heartbreaking. I don't want to have to be talking like this. I honor my mother and father, but, truth and justice is most important to me. And when I started asking questions, especially when Epstein, was arrested and everything came out, I kind of said, Dad, like, what is this about? Like, these are a lot of the people that what's the scoop here? Did you ever see this? And, what's going on? Or was it like McCain's wife said, and, you guys all knew what was going on, but what were you going to do about it? And, when I would ask questions like this, as well as about Laura Silsby and Haiti and her connection to Amber Alert, and kind of inquiring how the National Center for Missing Exploited Children was responding to the questions about her and the connections. I just, instead of, my father really talking to me, and I almost thought, naive me, I thought that he would actually be proud. We've been a crime fighting family since I was born. And I kind of thought that he would really, kind of respect that and be into it. But instead I was met with a lot of, oh, this is ridiculous. Oh yeah, what were we going to do? And, this is crazy. And, kind of very deflective responses. And then things kind of started cascading from there. The more that I kind of talked out, spoke up and spoke out about things and questioned the narrative. And as I look deeper, and as we'll see coming up, it gets deep, right?
It most definitely does. When you were asking these questions of John or your father, was this kind of over a period of a lengthy amount of time? Was this kind of one day where you just dropped this bomb on him, where he kind of started pushing it away? I mean, your family better than anybody else that's out there, better than the media, better than his friends. I mean, you grew up. This was your life. For us, it's a story, it's a show, but for you, it was your life. When you started asking these questions, did anything kind of register with you? Like my dad is just, something's not right here. And do you remember what kind of questions specifically started making it go from, hey, it's this to actually being aggressive towards you in his response? Do you remember?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, specifically the Epstein, and that is what kind of made me, kind of start questioning things and really started setting off alarms within me. Just these responses didn't line up. The over, emotion that was with it, again, shaming me for asking. When I would think that somebody would just really want to answer it and actually be interested in talking about these things, especially given what he does and what his life's about. So that really did strike a nerve. I also should say that I not only was asking questions, but I was speaking up. I was starting to speak up about the abuse that, you kind of realize as you grow, that had happened to me growing up, and that I've endured, obviously up until this day. It seems to have gotten worse, as we'll find out. But yeah, I was speaking up about the abuse and kind of the coercive control and narcissistic abuse that, I've had therapists, I have healing groups and things that, I kind of come to, and really trying to protect my children. And these people on TV and personalities, they have exactly that. They have a public persona. And it's very interesting, how people love my father's vigor and his passion, how he says dirt bags and scumbags and everything, but they don't really, I think about what that might translate into in private, behind closed doors.
And I think that's the part that people are going to be a little bit more receptive towards and understanding of, given the current climate that we're in right now, as everybody kind of does, all their own individual investigations or deep dives or rabbit hole, whatever, you call it, people are starting to realize, hey, the information that we've been fed over our lifetime is kind of like a Hollywood movie script. They've told us what they've wanted us to hear. They've told us, what we're supposed to believe. They've, and we'll get into it, they've done programming. And when I look to, America's Most Wanted and the stories that was there and the theme music that was behind it, I mean, just as a kid, I know it made me like, hey, if I'm going to the, the Boys and Girls Club, like my head's on a swivel. So if that's the fear you had as a young kid, if you're aware of this, I'm sure that translated into parents, the way, and somebody had put in the comments a little while ago, the story of Adam Walsh really changed how people took care of their kids. And even though there's some darkness behind that story, at least there's some positive things that came out from it. It's just unfortunate that it came at the sacrifice of your family. So if we can kind of go back in time a little bit and, give Mike a little bit more time, and hopefully he gets this audio stuff worked out from growing up, do you now, when you look back hindsight, do you remember anything, whether it was things you saw or places you went or people you and your family visited, that now you look back and you're like, that was this? Like, are there anything specific that comes to mind? I see you smiling, so I'm thinking you probably remember a few things that you can share with us.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to, it's a very serious topic, but it's just wild, that notion of actually looking back on things and really processing them in in a different way, and seeing different things from what you experience or what you remember as a child, and when you're involved in it and kind of enmeshed and caught up in that. It was very much like the John and Meghan Walsh show, and the big narrative, and that's what we were worried about as kids, was really always being there, and showing up for my parents wherever they needed and for this cause. So absolutely, looking back on things, it would take me hours to go through even just the different years of my life of things that I noticed. And that's, really something, you had asked right before if there was something specific, but, again, as you also mentioned, that a lot of us have been realizing these things. A lot of us have been talking about it. And, that was really wild for me, and also very validating. Yeah, growing up, I mean, for instance, why was I a baby, at the White House all the time, and around lobbying for legislation, and around all these adults at tables, and in these little dresses, and, presented to the presidents and different things like that. Excuse me. And then, throughout my youth, just, there's pictures of me with George Michael, being held as a child that's like a little too old to be held like I am for pictures. And, just these little nuances, honestly, I mean, that's how they get away with it. That's how they program us. And then you look back and kind of pick it apart. But yeah, definitely. I mean, the trips that we've gone on around the world, and where they were, specifically like Australia and China, and, specific places, India, Morocco, and who we were with royalty, and, just different, money, and around those environments. So yeah, I don't want to take too much time going into each of those, but there are definitely a lot of instances that I look back on, even from, my time in the music industry and how I got into that, moving from fashion, and kind of being targeted at LA Fashion Week, if you will, and then moving into music, and based in Chicago. Actually, my 4-year-old son is with the best friend, childhood best friend, and current best friend, and they work together, of Kanye West. So after being around fashion and art, and obviously a background in youth and entertainment and politics, it just all kind of started flooding in, if you will. Once I left, I kind of said, what does the devil look like? What is evil, if I were to kind of put it in the context of our world here on earth? And, to me, it started just coming, and I would literally ask them in the music industry, I would look these people in the face, and I would say, what is this? Is the devil like men in black suits with contracts? Like, what are agents? Yeah, just be asking these things and these notions, when you're in the studio, or the handler, basically artist developer, is driving you around, and you find a Freemason ring in his car door, and he's asking you, oh, you must know about that, your father, and everything. At that point, I was like, I don't know about this stuff. This was 6-7 years ago, and thought it was silly, and just kept going. You're in your world, you're doing your work. That's a whole other night for us to talk about how, the position of actually being a celebrity, or, a figure, and where that mentality is, and how they really get you when you think you're doing something good or succeeding.
No, and in kind of like what I was talking about in Spaces the last couple of days, there's a lot of stuff going on right now in the news, and it's important stuff, but I always kind of also see it kind of as a distraction. because there's a trial that started on Monday with Ghislaine Maxwell. And, we're getting a lot of look, squirrel, and look here and look here and look there. And literally, outside of the Kyle Rittenhouse case, and I'm starting to develop a little bit of a theory on that, which is a whole nother show. But when you look at the Ghislaine Maxwell case, that started on Monday, and all the people that are tied to that, I think what we're going to end up seeing over the next few weeks, hopefully not months, but the next few weeks, is really going to shock the conscience. And I think that's another reason why the show with you tonight was so important, because you literally been in and around a lot of these people whose names we're probably going to see in the media, over the next few weeks. So you confront your dad and you hit him up with these questions, and he starts to give you pushback. And as a result of that, this is where things started to really destroy your personal life, and you ended up losing your kids. Can you kind of tell us what happened and what your dad and the Florida CPS kind of did to you, and explain that story to us?
Yeah, thank you. And every second without my children is absolutely terrifying and heartbreaking. My children were my life. I left everything in the industry in Hollywood to be a mom. And so when this started happening, I've when you're in a wealthy family or you're close with your family, you are taken care of. I was working towards a community learning farm, actually. And so my parents were supporting me through that. I was also in school for functional nutrition when all this occurred, to really help people and leave all the shenanigans behind. But, I started asking questions. I was also very weary because the way that they were handling money, they hired a financial a person to handle their finances about 2 years ago, which I ended up finding out horrible things about. I was contacted by a couple of her victims, where she targets men apparently, and, commits financial fraud, identity theft, things like this. So as a 30-something-year-old woman, and, her coming into my family and dealing with money and different things, for my parents, I was very encouraging to my dad that would be a great thing. But also, I have every right to question her and, what her motives are and what her experience is and things like that. So when I started doing that, I started getting some alarms going off within, and I started looking into some paperwork and different things. My home, my parents said, was a gift to me 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago. And I was very appreciative of that. That was a start for us while I was developing the farm, like I said, for the future. And so leading up to this, I just started realizing that the amounts of money that they were giving me were, enough for gift tax exemption and different ways that they were doing creative accounting. And I actually asked my father weeks before this happened if they were trying to get a conservatorship on me. I just knew some of the ways that they were handling their estates, and started seeing whose names they were in, and it wasn't in their names and stuff like that. And I was told I was crazy again. And, I should just be glad that they're helping me and all of this. So, of course, being gracious, I said, okay, I'm going to trust you for a little bit. But I was asking the questions, and there was turmoil. Again, I was speaking up about the abuse as well personally. It's not just the questions I was asking. It was me actually finally speaking up about what I'd endured, and especially from my mother all growing up. And really wanting to be on my own, really wanting to provide for myself and my children. And, I've worked really hard for that, as well as being a stay-at-home mom. So we had an incident on Thanksgiving. I went to their home last year for Thanksgiving, where I tried to leave. I felt very weird there with the way my mother was being. She tends to fluctuate in moods. She isn't diagnosed, but it's very manic and borderline and all of that kind of stuff. So I didn't want to engage in it anymore. I had done that in the past, and my parents, unfortunately, are really addicted to trauma and drama. They haven't gotten help for their trauma of my brother. They were thrust right into the spotlight, which we know is what Hollywood likes to do, and contracts and all of that get you at a low point or a desperate place, and offer you, whatever they're offering, money and fame and all of that, under the guise of this is so your son won't die in vain. My father says that a lot. It's a line he was given to justify, this stuff. And so I was speaking up about that. I went to Thanksgiving and I decided to leave because I didn't want to engage. And my father started blowing up. They said that they were going to keep my daughter there and I could take my 2 sons home. And I said, this is crazy. They're my children. I'm leaving with my children. I'm a grown woman. Please let me leave and stop this, Dad. We can try again tomorrow. I'm just not going to engage in this. And then my mother comes out and starts filming me and they're saying this like script. And I said, I do not consent. You are framing me. Like, what are you all talking about? Let me go. And they continued to do this for about an hour and a half at our house. And finally, I pulled out my phone and started filming my dad and said, how do you like this? This is not what family does. What are you all doing? And he just kept saying, your children are terrified of you. You need help, all of this. And I guess I should also add here that my parents have shopped me to therapists since I was 8 years old. There's also roles in families, black sheep, golden child, all this, if you look into psychology. And I was very much shopped since I was a child to therapists for this diagnosis somewhere, and amazingly at 38 years old there's still no diagnosis through forced rehabs. They sent me to once, where we'll get into that at some point, the weird energy stuff and the Rothschilds and all of that I went through, and just to different therapists where they didn't find what they wanted. They were actually told that they need to take responsibility and that I wasn't the scapegoat for the family. So during this assault, I went to finally go take the phone from my mother, who then from there went to grab my hair, yank it backwards, and bloodied my nose. I actually have basal cell cancer on my nose, everyone. I'm healing it with Rick Simpson oil. I hope everyone looks into that because it's an amazing, thing for all of us. So look into Rick Simpson oil. But she bloodied my nose and she actually bit me, on my arm and things with my baby in my arms. And my dad's going, Meghan, give me your baby, while this is happening, instead of, stopping my mom. And so, that didn't really work for them. They actually tried through our trial to say that I assaulted them. And so, I left. And from then I said, while I have my therapist, I said, I'm sorry, I really want you guys to get help at this point in your life. After everything you've been through, and we've been through enough turmoil. It's been 38 years of this kind of relationship with me. And I really just wish you'd support me. And, I wish you'd get help for yourselves. You deserve it. You deserve peace. And this is clearly still affecting you. And my dad's health is not good. He just recovered from prostate cancer and different things. So, on the stand, he says that he didn't hear from me in the hospital while I'm, calling him and texting him and asking him if I can pick him up. And I'm telling him my doctor that will do IV treatments for him and vitamins and, all these things. And he's saying that, he never heard from me. So it's this continued drama. I know I got a little off from the question, but, it was just this kind of perpetual thing. So I was keeping my children and I and protecting, which we'll get into with CPS and how they do actually give children to abusers and shame the protective parents many times. And my father with his team, they filed to take my home, a forced sale on my home, which I never knew he was even half on the home. He told me it was mine. And he filed a forced sale weeks before he started a family court case. He went to my daughter's father, who was actually a donor. That's a different story. We had an agreement and he had kept to that for 9 years. And my mother wasn't happy with that when it happened, and they approached him and they hired his lawyer. They have the oldest law firm in Florida and family law, Nason Yeager, representing them and my daughter's father. They went behind my back, and when I wasn't answering and wasn't, seeing them and stuff. They started showing up at my home unannounced and started banging on all the windows and doors if I didn't answer. And
let me jump in real quick,
yeah.
Right here, Megan. Just to, I'm reading the comments as I'm listening to you give your testimony. And Mike's here, so I'll be bringing Mike in to this. This will be a good way to segue him in here. But just to let people know, because people are kind of, seeing some comments, why is she saying this, about what's going on in her family? What I want people to understand is, we're going to get to ask Megan some questions about some of the stuff going on, behind the scenes. We're going to have Mike that talks about some of the stuff that's going on, within Hollywood. He's, Hollywood insider, Hollywood reporter that was in it for 20 plus years. But the reason it's important that you guys understand what John Walsh and the Florida Child Protective Services did to Meghan, why this story is so critical, because everybody says, well, it's them. How does this affect me? And this is what I'm going to explain to you guys. A lot of us as conservatives, a lot of us as patriots right now, we're not in line with what the government is telling us we're supposed to be doing, whether, it has to do with the vaccination or whatever the case may be. A lot of us, because of our conservative values, we don't line up with what the government wants. So what happens, you can get people to quote unquote call you a right-wing extremist, call you a domestic terrorist. People can start making these allegations against you. And then before you know it, whatever state you're in, Child Protective Services is there knocking at your door to do an investigation. And what better way for a tyrannical government, spiritual warfare going on, an evil government, dark, satanic people. There's all this crazy shit that we know that's going on. What better way than to take kids away from conservatives, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a situation like Meghan. So understand why we're focusing on Child Protective Services right now. It's because you guys really got to understand how this works. Before I even heard of Meghan's story, before I even came across Mike, several months ago, I was telling people, if you want to hurt conservatives and bring them to their knees, how do you do it? You do it with their children. If you use people's children as leverage against them, you will get the majority of people to do whatever you want. So you have to hear this story and understand how they operate. So this way you have the tools with you to recognize it and fight against it. So with that, let me bring in Mike and do an audio check. And Mike,
real quick to that, I do want to point out, thank you for saying that. I do want to point out that, which we will get into, I was heavily discriminated. My case and my children were taken based on my religion, my choice to homeschool, my choice to not accept the COVID vaccine. And my father, even himself in court, shamed me and asked for a gag order 3 times, stating how I was associated with QAnon, how I was a domestic terrorist. And thank you for bringing that up, because it is very, very real, and the courts loved it.
I'm sure they did. Mike, let me do a real quick audio check. Can you hear me and Meghan? Okay, we can definitely see you, but we can't hear you. I wish I was a better lip reader, because then I could probably know what you're saying. So I don't know if you maybe have some headphones. You want to try some headphones, but I can hear Meghan fine. I just can't hear you. So your video's good. So what I'll do, Mike, is I'll move you back into the green room. Once you got your audio up and ready, just flag me down. I can see you. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll bring you back up with us. So you end up in the court scene, Meghan, and what is the allegations that they used to actually remove your children from you? In the end, what was it that kind of sealed the deal?
Mm-hmm. And this is something that is probably the most elusive and easiest to get away with, to take children. They said again that I had severe untreated mental illness, and that I was psychologically abusing my children, was what they ended up going with. That's the easiest way to take children. It's the lowest burden of proof. Also, that's a big deal. I want to say for the viewers, another reason why we are discussing this tonight is that everyone really wants to talk about trafficking and child trafficking and the elites and the satanic ritual abuse and Epstein and all of this. But I think that that's really detracting from the fact that we actually are the ones that need to do something. And the way that we do that is locally and as the people, because CPS is the largest trafficking agency in our country for children. If we hear these huge numbers, but do we ask where these children come from? I mean, we don't, even if you were to report your local, kidnapped children or missing children, it would not equal that number. They're not, this is a thing that my father came in with, this serial killer narrative from Ottis Toole and Henry Lee Lucas, excuse me. And, we see this in Gabby Petito's stuff. There's always a narrative there. So, that's really important to remember. And actually, I should, not to skip around, but I do want to answer something in the beginning. A big way that I started looking at this and questioning things was that I started looking at Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole. And I said to myself, I want to look at this from not the narrative having to do with my brother. I want to look at these people. And from there, that's when I really started to find specifically Henry Lee Lucas, videos of him speaking on Ottis Toole and their relationship and just kind of the goings on.
Real quick on that, Megan, just for those that maybe don't know the story of your brother's murder, if you can kind of let people know who Ottis Toole is and his relationship to this whole story, and the same thing with Henry Lee Lucas, just so people understand who it is that you're talking about.
And again, I apologize. I didn't mean to skip from CPS to this, but I think that this is very important.
It is.
So obviously my brother was taken from Sears 1981. Later, as we saw in the clips in the beginning, Ottis Toole, once this character Joe Matthews came into it, which actually you find out when I looked into it, Joe Matthews was originally the man that was hired from outside the department, Hollywood Police Department, and he was hired to come in and interrogate my father and the different people. So he brags about keeping my father in interrogation for 9.5 hours, which my father had an alibi of being at work. He was not a huge suspect. So 9.5 hours is interesting. Then I started looking at the records, and many of the witnesses were asked via picture ID if my brother was the boy that they recognized being there that day. And initially, many of them said that they did not recognize the boy. He was not the one that they saw that day. And then they note in the records that they hypnotized them, and including my mother. So I started asking, the real thing before this that I started asking was, who hypnotized my mother? Who decided to hypnotize my mother? And I was, again, shamed. Oh, you're crazy. Oh, why are you even asking this? This is ridiculous. But I did notice that, and it all went back to Joe Matthews. So I looked into Joe Matthews' past, and he at the time was actually outside and teaching other law enforcement, departments and things like that regarding nonverbal interrogation techniques. So I found that quite alarming, actually. I mean, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I did, especially when
there's a lot that I find alarming when it comes to Matthews, and correct me if I'm wrong. At some point, I don't remember how many years later, but at some point, your mom, Reeve is how you say your name, correct?
Reve.
Okay, so your mom Reve goes to your father and wants Matthews as a private investigator. Am I right with that so far? Okay,
that's the story. I never heard that. It's her story.
Well, the story that's out there. So
yeah,
when I look at the investigation that Matthews did, and for those of you that are unfamiliar, Matthews ended up coming later and re-looking at all the evidence in Adam Walsh's murder. And I did investigations. I worked homicides, for many years. And when I find out that Investigator Matthews goes and rechecks the vehicle of, Ottis or, Ottis Toole, however you say his name, and then finds a camera roll of film in the trunk. Let me tell you, I have worked with some great officers, but from time to time, I've worked with some really dumb ones as well. I have never, when you're talking a homicide scene and vehicles, So many people looked through that vehicle, not just the investigators, but just the curious Georges. I can say if I'm a betting man, I'm about 99.999% sure if there was a roll of camera film in the trunk of that vehicle, somebody would have found it that day. So the fact that this private investigator comes in, finds this roll of film that has all these alleged images, that have to do, I hate to say it, they're graphic, these graphic images that deal with the death of your brother. And then at the same time frame, Hollywood Police Department, and when we say Hollywood, we're talking about Florida Hollywood, Hollywood Police Department Chief, what was his name? I don't remember his name. I thought I might have had it. Chief Wagner. So the new Hollywood Chief Wagner comes in and says, okay, case is solved, case is closed, we're done, everything's under wraps. That doesn't sit right with me. And I really wish Mike's audio was working, because I'm sure he would have some stuff to say about that. But this is just kind of the deep, dark, twisted stuff that's going on within this case. And so once again, remember, this can happen to you. So I didn't mean to take you off track there, Megan, but it was just something that I remember when I was looking into this. I mean, aside from some other things, and, there's some questions I had about some of the statements that your mom made, because, as I'm looking at these videos and I take into consideration, this is probably, the 20th interview they've done, and so when you're not looking at the original statements, I'm honest when I look at these things, that can affect certain things. But just at the same token, I'm a father, and I'm the father of, girls that are growing up adults, and I'm also the father of a 1-year-old. And I don't even want to imagine being in the situation that, your parents were in. But I don't care if it was 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later. I just can't fathom the idea of me doing these interviews and not just being overwhelmed with emotions. And there was a particular interview, and I want to ask you this because I just want your take. I know your father had an alibi, but has it ever? And if you don't want to answer, I respect that. But during this whole ordeal, has it ever crossed your mind that even though your father may have had an alibi, or your mother may have had an alibi, that there's more to this story than what they're telling you?
Absolutely. I mean, the case itself, you brought up the photos found, and actually there's been many people for the past 40 years that when you don't listen to the mainstream narrative that you're given, and you actually do look a little out of that realm, you do find that there are many people that, especially in the area at that time and still to this day, and also police officers that were involved at the time, or detectives like Hoffman, who really weren't buying this story at all. My mother's times didn't line up, my father. Well, and that's another thing I started doing, was I actually started looking at not only Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole, who then were speaking about being actually recruited by the CIA and being trained assassins to find their murder weapon on the scene when they arrived. And interesting enough, people will find that Bush Sr. was the governor of Texas at the time where Henry Lee Lucas was sentenced to death. He was on death row. And Bush was known for being very strict on pardons. He never pardoned anybody. And then days to maybe a week right before the scheduled execution of Henry Lee Lucas, suddenly Bush Sr. Pardons him. Why would you pardon one of the worst nationally known serial killers? And then you see, again, him bragging about, we were chosen to be these ugly faces on the TV to cover up what was really going on. And I did see someone make a comment about, I believe it was Penny actually, make a comment about the finders, and that also plays in to it eventually. But there were a lot of questions. Even the picture of the face that Joe Matthews found later, a lot of these people that I was saying are still questioning, or still not believing the narrative to this day. They found pictures, the actual, the face that we saw just there, the luminol, is actually only a portion of the full picture, the actual one photo. And when you look at the photo that's not zoomed in to make it look like a face, it actually looks like a boot mark. So, you know, it was things like that. And again, Joe Matthews came back in later and actually reminded my parents that he had interrogated them. And, you know, he got back involved, and he's profited greatly from that. You know, books and, news spots and on Fox News and different things like that. So yeah, there was a lot to question. Even the head itself that was found, you know, my brother's head was found in Vero Beach, Florida, which is where my parents actually decided to move. And I was brought up in Vero Beach, and I always found that, and many others found that kind of odd that their son's head was found there. And then they decided to move there, which is also interesting. And satanic ritual abuse, you would say the head is in Vero Beach, Florida. So again, going back to the police departments, which this has a lot to do with, and a lot of us, you know, are realizing that police departments and the brotherhoods and different things like that are very interesting to look into, especially in all of this. So I actually called and started also looking at my father's bosses at the Diplomat Hotel. He was working at the Diplomat Hotel at the time, and he really brags about how he was a hotelier, and he was going back and forth to the Bahamas, which I do know. I was actually hid out in the Bahamas for a year because there was a hit put out on my life when I was 1 year old by NAMBLA, which is the North American Man-Boy Lovers Association, did put a hit out on my life. And so they hid me out in the Bahamas, which again, I have interesting memories from being there and what occurred. But you know, I started looking.
Now,
Yeah.
at 1 year old, obviously you're really small. So is this something that your parents explained to you happened, or is this like an actual recollection that you have? I mean, I would imagine you're too young for it to be your own memory. So is this something they told you?
Well, we would go back and forth when I was, you know, also younger after that, because of his connections there. But you know, my father actually even spoke about it. I believe it was last year, or the year before, during his speech at the DOJ. So it's pretty known. That's something he likes to say, that NAMBLA put a hit out on my life, which I also find interesting because people, that was only, you know, I'm 38, and for people to think that, you know, mob activity or hits on people's lives is like a passé thing, it's, you know, that's not that long ago, where we already have evidence of, you know, my life having a hit on it. My brother was rumored, you know, the big opposing narrative to the story that we've been told about Adam is that it was drug related, that my father was involved with nefarious people in Hollywood, and he was refusing to, I don't know, pay a ransom or go along with something that they wanted. And so they put a hit out on my brother's life. So, you know, again, I wasn't there, but then I start looking into it, and I actually called and have known throughout my life his boss, John Monahan's son. And so I called him and was talking with him, and I was asking him, you know, what was the lifestyle like? You know, what was your dad like in the day? And the Diplomat Hotel, I mean, it was Hollywood, Florida, the Diplomat Hotel. They had Liza Minnelli, the Doors, you know, all these people going through. You can only imagine the scene there. You know, my dad used to brag about being a cabana boy and a playboy, you know, and all of this. So I start looking, you know, asking his son, you know, what was that like growing up? What was your father like? His father was very much a father figure and a mentor to my father. And really brought him in and started grooming him into this lifestyle that they were living. And so I started asking him, which actually there was a rumor our whole lives growing up that John Monahan's wife died. She did die. She fell down a flight of stairs, and we were told that she tripped on her nightgown and fell down a flight of stairs. Now I asked Tommy, you know, what his take was, and he said I was in the kitchen eating breakfast with the nanny, which is another big theme, and that's something I started talking to my dad about, and he did not like. You know, was these men that go out, they say that they're, you know, doing all this good, or these influential or these big, you know, personality men, when they're really, you know, maybe doing nefarious and different things behind the scenes, and then their wife and children are at home, and that affects them. And the wives start, being upset, or they turn to drinking or something like that. And then the men say, what's wrong with you? You have the house and the country club and everything you could want, like, why, look, you must be crazy. Something's wrong with her, if they start talking or, anything like that. And I've seen my dad help his friends whose wives have done that or were upset about their infidelities or things that they knew on the inside that they were doing, and even use the sheriff to harass them and silence them, when I was growing up. So, of course, you don't realize that. They put it in terms of she's mentally, we don't know what's going on with her suddenly. We're very afraid, all these things. And then you find the truth out when you get older. But, back to John Monahan, I was asking about Tommy, and he said, yeah, I was eating breakfast with the nanny in the kitchen, and I heard a thud, and I looked over, and my mom was laying at the bottom of the stairs in a pool of blood. And I got up and I looked, and my father was standing at the top of the stairs. And that had always been a rumor again. And, but, we're not allowed to talk about that. And then I said, well, what was your father's relationship with the Hollywood Police Department? And he said, oh, they had a great relationship. It was a barter system. It was, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. If someone got caught, drinking and driving or something, they'd offer them a suite for the weekend, or, an invitation to one of the celebrity parties or something, and it would go away. So they had this camaraderie, and they knew each other well. Also, the Hollywood Police Department is directly across the street from the Sears department stores, ironically, as well. So, it's a big picture, you guys, and this is just an intro, and there's a lot to cover. But, just as far as looking at those details and the lifestyle and what they were leading. And that also leads me to what was a big deal, and what people don't really realize is, I was looking next for the deposition of James Campbell. And some people may know who James Campbell is, but most people will not. James Campbell was actually the 20-something-year-old living in my parents' home at the time. He actually moved out a few weeks before Adam's disappearance, and he was living in the home with my parents and having an affair with my mother. My father had met him at the Diplomat Hotel when he was about 11 or 12 years old, and then when he was about in his early 20s, he moved in with my parents. And Adam would say, I have two daddies, one that goes to work and one that takes care of the house. James is very, quoted for saying, I'd go to work and I'd come home and, get Adam ready for bed. He would sleep with me sometimes when he was scared, different things like that, that came into play with James Campbell. So I was looking for those depositions of his take on it, which actually came up in Sears case. For those that aren't familiar, my parents actually attempted to sue Sears department store after my brother was found. And they ended up dropping the case because of James Campbell's deposition and the judge allowing it to, they tried to get it thrown out and insisted. And they kept it in and the judge said, this is absolutely vital to the case. Sears was actually able to prove that my mother did not leave my brother for 5 or 10 minutes. She left him. He was alone in the department store for over 90 minutes, actually. And then James Campbell's, deposition, really notes my parents' cocaine and marijuana use, their, the domestic issues that were going on. He even states that I wouldn't be surprised if Adam actually ran away. I moved out because I was, trying to get my life together in hopes that Reve and Adam would join me eventually.
There's definitely a lot to pack with him. And I definitely had heard that story about the affair. I mean, I heard a couple different, variants of it, that it was something that your dad was aware of and okay with. I heard it was done behind his back. There's a lot to definitely unpack with that. With that, Mike just messaged me. It looks like his audio is working. So I'm going to bring him up and do an audio check. And
he's the technical guy. I'm the one in trauma, just trying to get it out. But he's the articulate
check
one.
1 2, check 1 2.
Okay, we can hear you, Mike. So
can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Your video's a little spotty, but Don't worry about it, man. Audio things happen. You actually, and your video is good too now. You are looking 1080 solid, man. And we're getting the people in the chat saying they can also hear you.
They're looking.
Well, now we see your roof.
You can hear me okay?
We can hear you fine, and there you are. Okay, now we got you.
See your roof? That's my ceiling in this room.
Okay, no, we can see you now. We can see you perfect, so we're good.
How are you guys?
So real quick, just to let everybody know. So this is Mike.
Yeah.
Mike's been tied into Hollywood, like I said, as an insider reporter for the last 25 years or so. Mike, real quick, you want to just kind of let everybody know a little bit about yourself so they know who they're watching on the screen?
My name is Michael Earl Pack. I'm from Antioch, Illinois, the same place that Kyle Rittenhouse is from, oddly enough, although no one's ever heard of him. I've asked everybody. It's a small town. It's pretty like a dark town, but then worked in Hollywood for 25 years, worked for the, collected deep state checks and, got to a pretty high level, I guess. I sold a lot of some really successful shows that one show sold to 30 countries and was a highest rated show for the Reels channel for 3 seasons. And then once you get to a level, and it's weird, Meghan and I, we both had a handshake deal with William Morris Agency, which is really weird. That doesn't happen, and usually that's not a good thing. You want to, because contracts, at least they, no one's ever going to sneak and take your intellectual property. So that's kind of the story of my life. And then I was able to work my way, went broke and came back to Chicago, where I'm from, and I knew I could navigate and just destroy the, just save up a bunch of data and information and expose it. And then doing a bunch of research, and I met this lovely young lady 7 weeks ago on the phone, and we've been doing some crazy research. And the things we found, it's unreal, my man. I mean, and it's been great. I got to tell you guys, I was telling Meghan this earlier today. For the first, what is it? I thought you think you know a lot, and then, but with Meghan and what we've learned, 50% of what I've learned now, what we do know now, and what we're exposing, is more than it's more than 50% of what I knew before. It's really phenomenal. All right, the phone call. So yeah, it's just been amazing.
So real quick, Mike, just so you know, your audio's coming in and out for me, so I'm catching every couple words, and it looks like the audience is having the same thing.
Let me see if I can.
So. Yeah, so I'll move them back into the green room, and we'll try to push on Meghan. We'll probably have to do a second show and bring Mike on to get all these things covered. So
yeah, there's a lot of facts and stuff. We're just trying to start, introducing people to kind of the overall. I did see in the chat someone say, what would be the motive for this operation or things. And, that's what we're getting to. My father is really, he's put a lot out there, and, he's been this face for these, these causes and this cause specifically. But really what we're seeing is a lot of incentives, kind of, almost like a paid opposition, I guess, for our terminology here. I know everyone gets that here. A paid opposition, if you will, and to kind of, hit people with the emotion. Like my brother's case, like we said, really affected people. It really gets you with that emotional, not manipulation, but, if it's not true, then it's manipulation. But, really that kind of gets out of, you don't question really after that for the most people, because of the emotion, you wouldn't question it. But
what everybody has to understand with that too, is if you go back in time, I had to do it as research because, like I said, I was too young to remember. When I went back and started researching it, when you look at what John Walsh brought, with America's Most Wanted and all these other things, that literally is what created the emotion nationwide, and I would argue probably globally, but definitely nationwide, that started pushing all these NGOs of, for the Missing Children Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, all these things were based off of that story that got thrown into the limelight that emotionally made everybody a part of it. It's what got the financing going. It's what, ultimately led to Amber Alert, all these things that we now see, all these NGOs, which are now actually the ones that are, perpetrating these crimes. They're perpetrating the missing children. I mean, I could go on, on my own, and maybe I will do it, here in the next, few weeks. When I started looking at some of these NGOs and the money of who funds them and where it comes from, and it's a big circle. So when people are saying, what's the motive? Understand this was the seed back in the 80s that just kind of fed what we have. All these organizations we have today, this is where it started. This is the root case. It's kind of what Mike, if he was here, what he would kind of explain to people. This is why this story with your family is so important, because it got everything spawned from it.
And who was, and who also was part of starting that was Ernie Allen. There's a gentleman, Ernie Allen, who, he was actually in Louisville, Kentucky at the time of my brother's disappearance. And he was trying to start the first convention ever for child protection. And that was really focusing on runaways, abductions, exploitations, all of this. And that's where he brought together top experts, my parents, as well as where this convention really held the space for these people to come together and start approaching legislation and changing legislation and getting funding for these things. We also found a nonprofit for runaway aid out of Fort Lauderdale with my father's name on it that was prior to my brother's abduction. So that is indicating that they were establishing, getting funding for a nonprofit that was dealing with runaway aid. And now then my brother's abducted. I thought John Walsh got into the kid business, if you will, once, that tragic day happened and started, everything with his son going missing. And that before that he was a hotelier. So that didn't add up either. And yes, and actually another big question that I started asking him about, let's go back to Laura Silsby real quick to stay on these, the stuff that people can really relate to or know about. Laura Silsby, many of us know, was in Haiti in 2010. She was arrested and accused of kidnapping 33 children. They actually were not orphans. They had families. And Hillary Clinton went down and got her off the hook, intervened, and was involved in that. I started remembering that my brother and my father went to Haiti and bragged about going down there doing humanitarian work. And then that struck me to remember Hank Asher, who's one of my dad's good friends. Hank is very involved in, actually, I should say Hank Asher is the creator of LexisNexis search engine. He also created Matrix, which goes back to, Mike will get into that. I won't ruin his spot, but it goes into a lot of nefarious things.
Pause that thought real quick too, Megan, just so everybody knows that's wondering, what's this LexisNexis? It's what 99% of us use in law enforcement, and it tells us pretty much everything about you. What utility bills you have, what cell phone numbers you've had, what social medias you have, what cars. It literally gives us an entire life's profile on you. So when you hear the word LexisNexis and this guy's involvement with it, just understand that it's something that has to do with everything about your life. But please continue, Megan. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, it does. And that really, thank you for saying that, because that really touches on databases and this big brother and federalized policing. And that's what, again, going back to the question, why would this happen? Why would they do this? And that's a big reason, not only funding and NGOs, but also federalized policing. My dad and them rang in facial recognition and all of that we'll get to in a second. But going back to Haiti and Hank Asher, I did remember that. And Hank was also a huge donor to research hospitals like Johns Hopkins and Mayo. And, my dad's always been really interested in like stem cells and life extension, like all these, he loves this medical stuff and all of that. But that's for another time. But I did start looking into it, and they love to brag about themselves and what they do. So I found articles of Hank Asher on the Huffington Post, self-published, bragging about he and my father and his son-in-law and my brother taking private planes from South Florida in 2010 and flying over to Port-au-Prince, which is, I'm sorry, I didn't say that earlier, where Laura Silsby was, and participating in med tents. and helping with med tents. So that really kind of struck a nerve with me. I asked my research team to kind of look up the vicinity from Epstein Island to Haiti to the Bahamas. And that's an interesting line in the waterways, if you will. And so then we also have a case down in South Florida around the same time involving judges, profiting and having a racket set up of children being medevaced over from Haiti to South Florida. So all of that really turned me the wrong way. I did start asking my dad about that. And that was, again, another one of those, what are you talking about? I gotta go, you're crazy kind of thing. So, which many people find alarming now when we talk about it like this. So, looking into that, Hank Asher definitely was involved with him. I brought up Ernie Allen a second ago about the conventions and whatnot. And this goes back to the money, funding, NGOs, all of this. They started the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. He then went on to develop the sister organization, which is the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which on the board is Richard Branson and a lot of nefarious players there internationally, which we can only imagine in the context of what we talk about. And then I was watching Ashton Kutcher testify and his new efforts with Thorne and everything. And what do I see? Half of a face sitting next to him. And I realized that that's Ernie Allen. And I remembered a huge scandal about, internally in my parents speaking when it happened about Ernie Allen actually getting in a lot of trouble while he was with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and actually having to be escorted out of his office and asked to leave even. So we ended up finding out, and Mike was the one who actually located it on the National Center's own website itself, was their 2019 self-audit. And I'm skipping around. I brought Ashton Kutcher up and Ernie Allen because here he's, taken out. We see like Laura Silsby, they're, found out, they're asked to leave and handled, and then they're put somewhere else, right? And that also goes with Hank Asher and the databases, because if you look into Thorne, that's, again, these huge databases, facial recognition, cataloging children, and it's always this guise, which CPS uses also, and our president is using and everything, of the best interest of, which we really need to question when we hear that. Now it should be alarming when you hear in the best interest of. So here we see these players going through, they're taking their databases and, these things that they want to instill or profit from or whatever, and going throughout, and it's key players. So, that was really interesting to me, and was asking questions about it. So there's a lot of nefarious things. Mike has great layout and everything of that. Again, I'm more of the fill in the blanks and really tell the nuances of and how I got here, and what I was questioning, what I found personally. And I've just been very lucky to have them come on and really be able to do the research work for everyone else. But going back to that, we did find a 2019 self-audit that was up on their website. And I think many people will find this interesting, that they actually receive $38 million a year of taxpayer money. They are a 501c3. So the narrative to most people is that they are this government agency, or they are the go-to, which actually they are. Any reports that come in are not sent to, you're not told to call, the Department of blah, 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 some government agency to handle this. You're told to call the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And they brag about the millions of reports that they get sent every year. And so how are they actually handling that? And it being a clearinghouse and a database, how effective is this really? And this is our taxpayer money. This is $38 million to a 501c3 that is actually exempt from the Freedom of Information Act. They also receive $18 million from corporate private donors. And when we look at those, we see companies right off the bat, Facebook, Airbnb, TikTok, and even L Brands, going back to, Les Wexner, Richard Branson, this kind of a group. So, it's very interesting. And actually, during coronavirus, I had mom friends call me and say, my 13-year-old is being approached online on Facebook. What should I do? I said, hey, call the hotline, because that's what my dad told me to say. Call the hotline. And they would actually call back weeks later to check on the report. And they would tell them, we don't have any report. We don't know what you're talking about. I also told my father.
Absolutely disgusting.
They had, yeah, it is. I even had mothers calling me upset about their children's school pictures being taken, and they were notified that they were put in a database without a signature of consent, without being informed. And I've been proud of my moms. They've called and kind of really spoken up and questioned them, and the companies they're of course batting it off onto each other, and the National Center is not taking responsibility for that, but now they're having to address it. So again, going back to that, voices really matter, and we can actually do something if we start on a fundamental level and at the root.
And God First brought up a really good comment, so I threw it up on the screen so everybody can see it. With these 501(c)(3)s that are going on, and God First put they're exempt from FOIA. You guys actually learned this in the process. If you can tell us a little bit more about that and how you found that out.
Yeah, just researching. They're very blatant about it. They deny when they're requested. And I don't think that they're really requested. That's what's so amazing actually about this whole thing, is how they have just been risen up, not questioned at all, because it's children. It's, we're putting out this narrative, this is what we're doing. So they're not questioned. And I think for us to really bring it up, and for, the masses to kind of be at this point, many people didn't even know what a FOIA was, or what the Freedom of Information Act was, up until recent times, and it's great that we're all talking about it and learning these things. But I think it's just a matter that, people didn't really look at that. And that's CPS as well. There's no audits. There's no, oversight. And especially when you're a 501(c)(3, you're a charity,
No, let's do this, Megan, because I really want to cover some of this stuff, but I don't want to overlap it, because I really want to get Mike's take on it, because he sent me some great info, but I want him to be here when he covers it. So we'll do a part 2 to that. So before we wrap this up with your dad and your brother going to Epstein's Island. And I know there was another interview to Haiti. Sorry, I'm reading and looking at the same time. No, I appreciate it. With going to Haiti, there's something that your brother had shared with you that you disclosed in another interview. Are you comfortable with talking about that a little bit before we wrap this up and get ready for a part 2?
I think maybe that can be in the part 2.
Okay.
It was in Argentina, and it's a very touchy thing. I think what I would like to end on this is, and for part 2, really my point in coming out, we can really find out, like, we need to know the roots of these issues, or how it started. But in pertaining to the masses and currently what we're dealing with as a society today, again, we really need to realize the issues within CPS and how this is happening to traffic our children, how it is highly incentivized now that we're talking about the National Center, and and how that works. CPS is a complete system in itself. It's systemically wrong and ingrained to profit from children, and to take them, and it's happening all over. Children go missing out of CPS, and they're not reported, but money's still collected on them. Children are murdered, sexually abused, and where's the National Center and John Walsh talking about that? They like to give out the statistics and say that they're helping all these missing children, but why aren't we looking at that? Why aren't we tackling something like a systemic issue that we can really do something about, that would correct a lot of the missing issues, or the stuff that, kind of is the trickle down effect that they address today? And also, what about that $38 million? Why don't we put it into local efforts towards actually, we know between 24 and 48 hours are critical once a child or a person goes missing. And what is a database really doing that's pushing information out to other agencies? Enough of this protocol and paperwork and everything, which we're seeing becoming huge issues in a lot of different areas of life and judiciary and the system these days. So for me, I really want to, get this out and get the story out so people realize that. But I really do want people to start, really researching and looking into it themselves, as far as the hundreds of thousands of loving parents in this country that are fighting every second. I grew up in TV. I did see a comment about she's a great actress or something like that. You guys have to remember that I was born in the spotlight, if you will, in front of a camera. And this has been a mission. I've been speaking out about CPS and family court corruption prior to them taking my children, which was also another great reason for them to go along with this and do it. So I just want to keep that focus. And when we do part 2, we will get to more of that, and you'll see clips of how they took my children and how, the system works with that. But I want to keep that focus for our viewers, because that's really the source of trafficking, and that's how it starts, and children are shipped out. And we're not really asking those questions. We're talking about the trafficking. We're saying we want to do something about it. But we start local. We start auditing CPS. We start demanding that. We start holding these organizations, like we're saying 501c3s. You start in CPS with a department, and they do, you have a trial or the judge makes an order, but then it's all sifted out to private entities like Devereaux, Department of Child and Family Services. And these are all, again, not government agencies. These are private agencies that, when your children or the children that are taken from one place and transported by somebody to another place, and money is collected on them. These children are put in the foster care system, and the foster homes are really foster prisons. They are drugging our children up. And it's not just the trafficking that we have to save our children from. It's big pharma, it is academia, and all of these things then, go into the future of our children, as well as, and CPS is great at that. They take the children in. If they diagnose children or find a disability, they get more money. And we'll get into that, when it's appropriate. But I really just want people to start, looking at that and questioning that, because unfortunately the narrative, big theme is narrative versus truth. And the narrative that most people believe is that it is a good thing, and it's a good agency. And really horrifically, it's the exact opposite. The children are being taken from protective parents and put in the hands of abusers and profited from.
And I will speak to that with 100% confirmation, because in my career, and I shared this with Megan and Mike last night, I've responded to, unfortunately, hundreds of calls where CPS was coming out to a home, whether it was to do an investigation or whether it was to remove the children. And in 14 and a half years, only 2 times did I ever sign the form authorizing that to take place. So just so everybody knows, at least with California, and I think this applies to most states, CPS themselves cannot take your kids. They need to have the authorization from a court and a judge, or they got to get law enforcement to sign off on that. So please understand that as you guys start to learn these things. But I'm telling you, CPS is not good. I would have them come to homes. And I know we see it, because it's like everything else that the government does is they paint this beautiful picture of how we're going to go and extract kids from these horrible things and put them into these great, it sounds like a great idea, just like the red flag laws. See the connection. But what you don't realize is the kids that should be removed from homes are the cases that you see on the news all the time. They get reinvestigated, they get dismissed, and all of a sudden we find out those kids get murdered or killed by their parents. And you ask yourself, well, why did they do something about it? But what you don't hear is these stories like Megan's. You don't hear about these other parents who literally had their kids, quote unquote, legally stolen from them because somebody with some piece of paper said that they were smart enough to take away their kids. And I'm telling you, I had CPS workers that wanted me to sign the paper to have people's kids taken away from them because they did corporal punishment. And I'm not talking about they went, legitimately beat the kid. I'm talking about the kid said, F you to mom, and kid got smacked in the mouth. And they wanted me to sign the paper to strip the kids away. This is what CPS does. And I can tell you guys, Megan's story is one of hundreds of stories that have just never been heard. And I agree with you 100%, Megan. There has to be an audit into CPS, because I don't even want to think about how many parents right now have been separated from their kids unjustly, and the things that these kids are going through in these foster care facilities. And I'm not going to knock every foster parent. I've met great foster parents, but what I'm saying is understand that there is a plague of evilness that understands this system, and all the stuff that I've been seeing in the chat that everybody's afraid of. Understand that evilness knows how to exploit the system. They know how to legally get their hands on these kids, and then before you know it, they're two sheets to the wind, and nobody knows whatever happened to them. So 100%, thank you for sharing your story with us, Megan.
Yeah.
You and your family will always be in my prayers. We will do part two. I'll get with Megan and Mike tomorrow and figure out what's going on with the audio, and we'll do part two. So maybe in a week or two we'll wrap that up, because Mike has some amazing information, some videos. I know some of you probably want to say, well, this is crazy, I want to see proof. I'm looking at an email that Mike sent me. You guys are gonna get a lot of the answers that you're asking for. So Megan, once again, thank you for coming on the show. I'm sorry it didn't kind of work out the way we wanted to, but everything happens for a reason. And you know what? We were able to focus a lot on your story, and that's important. So
It does, and I really want to encourage people. Maybe this did happen for a reason, for people to really start researching. I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I'm having to go through this. I'm having to find these things out, just like we're all finding out things every day, and it's horrific for me, but I have to be strong, because if I can speak up about this and for all those parents, if anyone even goes on Facebook and looks up a family court or CPS corruption group or anything, you will find numerous. The numbers are just insane. We have hundreds of thousands of parents who are in trauma and fighting and grieving for children that they don't even know where they are. Their parental rights are being taken. We need the masses. We need people to really understand and get in this with us. We need people to protect our children, stand up for these parents that have been in this fight when everyone else is talking about everything or not realizing what's going on. There's parents that have been in this fight for over 10 years and have not given up and are still there for the other parents going through this. And, the head of the LA CPS just stepped down the other day, earlier in the week. We're having a lot of, when we're putting the pressure and we're, holding these local judges and these local departments responsible, they are cowering in 2 seconds, and we are having an effect. But at this point, we need everyone to realize this, especially when we're hearing so much about this passion of really identifying the trafficking and saving our children. This is literally how we save our children, and how we each can do it together.
Well, definitely appreciate it, Megan. And just so everybody knows, I really liked what I had working with Megan and Mike last night. And you guys, we're gonna have a part two, but in addition to the part two, you're gonna see us actually doing a lot of work together. The other thing is, if anybody was paying attention to the chat, you'll see somebody that was in the chat that goes by "See Me Now, Agent X." That's Penny, and if you think that she shared a lot in the chat, wait till I bring her on and hear what she has to say. That woman has an amazing amount of information and another very powerful story. And we'll be talking a lot about the MK Ultra stuff with her. So thank you for joining us tonight, Megan. I'll get with you and Mike tomorrow, and we'll work something out for part two so we can wrap this up.
With the whole thing. God bless you guys. God bless everyone. And I really look forward to, we want to change legislation. We really want to, get involved in this. So please, everyone, just reach out and get involved. Get involved.
All right. Have a good night, Megan.
You too. God bless.
So, unbelievable, right? I can always gauge how important the information in these shows are by the number of trolls that show up and start putting some stupid information in the comments. And I was able to boot a couple of them. A couple of you guys, brought them to my attention. And the last time I saw this amount of trolls was when we had Patel Patriot on. So when they show up, we're definitely over target. You guys keep Megan in your prayers. she smiles through the pain, and that's it's a sign of what strong people do, because they're trying to be strong for other people, and they don't want to show their hurt. But what I can tell you guys is the amount of pain and suffering that she's probably going through every night, wondering where her kids are, or if they're okay and what's being told to them. I don't even want to fathom what that might feel like. So please keep her in your guys' prayers. It was awesome tonight. Like I said, I'll get with them. We'll figure out a part 2, because I definitely want you guys to see some of these photos and some of this information that's out there with Mike. So we will definitely have it. So next week's guest is looking pretty interesting. I don't want to announce the name just yet, because I want to wait for a solid confirmation. And hopefully I get that in the next day or two. And once I have that solid confirmation, I think you guys are going to be excited about next week. So next week we have 2 shows going on. So one that's going to be on Tuesday, and we have another one that's going to be on Wednesday, and I'm waiting for that confirmation, and then I'll put them both out a little bit later this week. So with that, you guys have a good night. I made an outro video for you guys because a bunch of you guys were like, we need an outro, not just a goodbye. So let me get that ready, and then I will also close this with prayer, because that's something we're always going to do in this show. So, dear Lord, thank you for tonight. We always pray that it's your will that's done and not ours. And I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. I ask that you watch over Meghan's family, that you put your arms around her children and keep their hearts and their minds safe. I also ask that you put your arms around all the children out there that are missing, the families that are looking for them, and the pain that's in between, that you find a way to bring them home, or to bring the families peace to know that their children are with you and they don't have to live in the nightmare of wondering. Father, I ask that, like always, you hear everyone's prayers, spoken and unspoken, and that you protect us, Father. And we pray and we ask all this in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen. I will see you guys later tonight on Spaces, and I hope you guys enjoy the outro.